There is a man somewhere in your past who changed the direction of your life. Maybe you know exactly who he is. Maybe you can name the conversation, the room, the specific thing he said that landed differently than anything you'd heard before. Maybe you don't fully understand why it stuck, only that it did, and that you are standing where you are right now, at least in part because of him. Now here is the question most men never sit with long enough to answer. Who are you doing that for? Because somewhere right now, not far from where you are, there is a younger man running the same confused, expensive, lonely laps you ran before someone reached back and pulled you forward. He doesn't have the language for what's wrong yet. He just knows something is. He is making the same mistakes you made, carrying the same weight you carried, looking for the same thing you were looking for without knowing what to call it. And he is doing it alone. Not because there are no men ahead of him on the road, because the men ahead of him never looked back. This video is about why strong men reach back, not as a nice idea, not as something you get to when life slows down, but as one of the most important and most neglected responsibilities in a man's life, and what it actually costs when men who have something to give keep it to themselves. We are going to cover 5 things. Why men who only climb for themselves stay small. How real leadership is actually measured. How reaching back builds purpose. Why it builds humility, and what it does to a man's legacy. 5. Let's start with the hardest truth. Most men think of giving back as something that comes after. After the business stabilizes. After the kids are grown. After life slows down enough that there is bandwidth for something extra. It gets filed under someday. Under when I'm ready. Under after I figured out a few more things for myself. And so, it never happens. Or it happens in a watered-down form. A donation here, a motivational comment on someone's post there, a vague offer to grab coffee sometime that neither person follows up on. That is not reaching back. That is the appearance of reaching back. Real reaching back is when a man who has paid a price takes what he learned from paying it and deliberately invests it into another man who hasn't had to pay it yet. It is mentorship in its oldest form. Not a program, not a platform, a relationship. A man choosing to stay close enough to another man's life to actually influence its direction. It doesn't require a title. It doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require having everything figured out. It requires willingness. And most men, even good men, even men who know better, find a way to talk themselves out of it. Here is why. A lot of men want to rise. They want the progress, the respect, the discipline, the results, the income, the influence. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to grow. A man should want to get stronger. He should want to build a life that carries weight. But if all a man ever does is climb for himself, if his strength begins and ends with his own advancement, he stays smaller than he thinks, no matter how high he goes. Because success without investment shrinks a man. Here is what that looks like. A man builds a solid life, good income, respected, handles his responsibilities. By any external measure, he is doing well. But look at the men around him. His team at work. Are they getting stronger under his leadership, or just getting managed? His younger brother. Has he ever invested a real hour in that man's direction? The guys in his orbit who are 10 years behind him. Does he even see them? He doesn't. He's too focused on the next level for himself. And the irony is this. A man can be deeply disciplined, highly successful, and genuinely admired, and still be operating too small. Because strength that serves only the man who carries it is not full strength. It is strength with no purpose beyond itself. The ceiling on that kind of life is lower than it looks. Eventually, a man who has only climbed for himself arrives somewhere and finds that the scoreboard doesn't fully satisfy him, that the wins feel smaller than they should, that something is missing he cannot name. That missing thing is almost always the same. His strength hasn't made anyone else stronger, and deep down, he knows it. Strong men reach back because they understand what selfish men don't. A man's life is supposed to carry weight beyond himself. A lot of men like the idea of leadership because of how it sounds. The respect, the authority, the image of being the man with answers, the man others look to. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to lead. But leadership is not proved by how many people notice you. Leadership is proved by how many people get stronger because of you. That changes everything. Because now leadership is not about image. It is about impact. Not about being admired. About being useful. And useful is a different standard than impressive. Here is the test. If you are a father, are your kids becoming steadier because of your presence? If you are a husband, is your home stronger because of how you carry yourself in it? If you are a manager, are the people under you growing in competence and confidence, or are they just executing tasks? If you are an older brother, a coach, a friend with more experience, are the men around you stronger because you are in their lives? That is what matters. A lot of men are impressive in appearance, but weak in influence. They know how to talk, but not how to build. They know how to perform, but not how to invest. They know how to climb, but not how to pull. Strong men do both. They carry a standard and then pass it down. They grow and then guide. They get sharpened from above, and then they turn around and sharpen somebody below. And here is what most men miss. You do not need a platform to do this. You do not need a title or a crowd or a large audience. Sometimes it is one conversation with a younger guy at work. Sometimes it is your son. Sometimes it is a man in his 20s who has talent but no direction. You do not need a stage. You need responsibility. Because influence is not something you enjoy. It is something you steward. And if you steward it well, the men around you start becoming stronger. That is the proof of real leadership. Let me stop here for a second and ask you something directly. Is there a man in your life right now, younger than you, in your actual orbit, who is navigating something you have already navigated? Not a stranger, not someone you need to find, someone already near you. If the answer is yes, and for most men watching this, it is yes, then everything we are about to cover is personal, not theoretical, not about men in general, about you and that man, and what it costs both of you when you stay comfortable and he stays alone. Keep that man in your mind for the rest of this video, because the charge at the end is going to ask you to do something specific about him. A lot of men are not just tired, they are empty. They are functioning, handling life, getting things done. But deep down, something feels flat. Not because they are lazy, but because they are using their strength only to serve themselves. And that always leaves a man hungry for something deeper. One of the fastest ways to put real meaning back into a man's life is to make his strength useful to somebody else. When a man starts investing in another man's growth, something shifts. His pain becomes useful. His lessons become useful. His past mistakes, his failures, his hard-earned corrections. They stop being just part of his private story and start becoming tools he can hand to someone else. The scar stops being just damage. It becomes wisdom that can be passed down. Here is what that looks like. A man in his mid-40s, construction business, married, kids, starts meeting with a 23-year-old from his crew once a month. No formal agenda, just coffee and honesty. The younger man brings whatever is on his mind. The older man asks questions, shares what he knows, pushes back when the excuses start. 3 years in, The younger man has bought his first home, proposed to his girlfriend, and stepped into his first leadership role on the crew. None of it happened because of any single conversation. It happened because there was a consistent, honest, available man in his corner who cared enough to stay. And the older man? He will tell you those monthly coffees are some of the most meaningful hours of his week. Not because he is dispensing wisdom, because his life is finally producing something that outlasts a quarterly report. That is purpose. When a man sees that his example matters, that another man took a stronger step because he spoke up, avoided a mistake because he warned him, found clarity because he shared what he'd learned the hard way, it changes how he sees his own life. The struggle was not wasted. The lesson was not pointless. And the question stops being, how far can I go? And starts being, who am I bringing with me? That shift is one of the most important things that can happen to a man. This next one is the section most men don't expect. Reaching back is not just about what you give. It also does something to you. And what it does is keep you honest. The minute you take responsibility for investing in another man's growth, you become more aware of your own example. You start asking, am I living this? You start noticing the gaps between what you say and what you do. You realize quickly that real leadership is not about talking. It is about carrying yourself in a way another man can safely follow. That humbles a man. It reminds him he is not finished, that he still has blind spots. That if he is going to reach back with integrity, he better keep reaching up too. He better stay teachable, stay grounded, stay under correction himself. That is why this model is so powerful. Find a mentor for yourself, and then find someone to mentor. Both at the same time. Always. That keeps a man in the right posture. He is never just the teacher, never just the student. He is both, being sharpened and sharpening, receiving and giving. That rhythm creates a kind of humility that protects him from the thing that quietly destroys a lot of good men. Because nothing gets more dangerous faster than a man who wants to lead, but no longer wants to be led. Here is what that man looks like. He is in his 40s, successful, has led teams, built things, earned real respect. Somewhere along the way, he stopped having anyone in his life who could actually challenge him. No one speaks into his life anymore. He has influence over others, but no one has influence over him. And slowly, not suddenly, his standards loosen, his blind spots grow. He starts preaching accountability while quietly excusing his own drift. He calls other men higher while privately accepting less from himself. He does not notice it happening. That is the danger. Reaching back, done honestly, prevents that. Because it keeps a man awake. It keeps success from poisoning him. It keeps strength from becoming pride. It reminds him that he is still in formation, still being built, still in need of correction, still on the road rather than at the destination. Most men don't realize that is a gift until they experience it. Now, the deepest truth. A lot of men talk about legacy, but most men misunderstand what it is. Legacy is not just what you leave behind when you die. Legacy is what keeps living because you were here. It is what continues through the people you strengthened, the standards you passed down, the men you helped build, the lives you steadied through your presence and your honesty. A man can leave behind money and still leave a weak legacy. He can leave behind a business, a title, a reputation, and a name, and still leave very little that actually makes the next generation stronger. But if he helps build men, if he passes down truth, discipline, courage, humility, and the willingness to stay in hard things, then something real continues after him. That is bigger than success. Because success can stop with one man. Legacy multiplies. Think about it this way. That older man from the construction crew, the one having monthly coffees with a 23-year-old. What actually happened there? That young man becomes a father at 30. He raises his kids differently because of what he received. Some of those kids grow up and do the same. The influence moves through time in a way no professional achievement ever could. What started as an hour over coffee outlives every person in that story. That is legacy in motion. And right now, the need for this is not abstract. A lot of young men are drifting, not because there are no older men ahead of them, but because the older men ahead of them never looked back. Nobody taught them. Nobody corrected them. Nobody modeled anything better. Nobody reached back. That gap is costing us more than most people are willing to name out loud. So if you are farther down the road in any real way, if you have paid for lessons a younger man hasn't learned yet, then part of your responsibility is to turn around and make that investment. Not when everything is perfect. Not when life slows down. Now. Because strong families, strong teams, and strong cultures are not built by men who hoard their strength. They are built by men who pass it down. That is how strength doesn't die with you. Here is the truth. Most men will not say out loud after watching a video like this. They feel it. Something stirs. They think, I know someone. I should do that. I've been meaning to. And then they close the tab and move on with their day. The feeling dissolves. The man they were thinking about stays alone. And nothing changes. Don't be that man. Not because you watched a video. Because you already know the cost. You know what it felt like to be that younger man. Running the same laps, carrying the same weight. Looking for something you couldn't name. You know what changed when someone decided you were worth their time. You know what that did to your life. That is not yours to keep. That is yours to give. So here is your charge. Specific and simple. Think about the man you had in your mind during this video. The one who is navigating something you have already navigated. This week, not someday this week, take one real step toward investing in him. Not a vague offer, a real one. A message, a direct conversation. A standing time on the calendar. One man, one step, this week. And then keep reaching up yourself. Stay under guidance. Stay teachable. Stay in the posture of a man who is still being built, because you are. Being sharpened and sharpening. That is how men grow without becoming arrogant. That is how standards spread. That is how the next generation of strong men gets built. Not through content, not through platforms, but through men who look back, reach down, and pull someone forward. That is the chain, and it only continues if you extend it. If this landed, subscribe to Someone to Be. Every video on this channel is built for the man who is done drifting and ready to be shaped. Like the video. Share it with one man who needs to hear it. And drop reach in the comments if you are done keeping what you have learned to yourself. You were built by men who reached back. Now go be one.